The BBC has experienced an occasion of deja vu this week. Is that right? As their highest paid presenter, Gary Lineker, £1.3 million a year, is caught up in yet another Twitter storm. This time it was after he criticised some Conservative politicians.
Well, yesterday, the proposed chairman of the corporation told a committee of MPs that his comments weren't particularly helpful, both for Lineker, himself and the BBC.
As far as I'm aware, the signing of the letter did not breach those guidelines. I do think, however, the more recent tweet that Mr. Lineker, in which he identified some two politicians, does, on the face of it, seem to breach those particular guidelines of public. I'm not sure how egregious it is, but it does. And I would imagine that the BBC is now looking into that.
Well, joining us now is sports journalist and broadcaster Chris Skudder. Chris, this seems like a case of history repeating itself somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, he's satisfied the impartiality guidelines previously, but yeah, I mean, this is, to me, it just feels like a playground spat now, you know, name calling on both sides. And I mean, I suppose what we're going to do is look at what the guidelines are. What Lineker's not allowed to do is criticise characters of individuals. And if you look at it, I mean, yesterday, Jonathan Gullis, he's sort of had a pop. Jonathan hasn't read the new guidelines, he said, or should he say someone read them to him? And he's also had a pop at Grant Shapps as well, calling him for Chaps Shapps. So it's a slanger match. It's all playground stuff, isn't it, really? I think Gary's been a bit emboldened by, you know, what happened last time, and thinks, you know, he is allowed to give his opinion, but he's just pushing it a little bit. I mean, I couldn't care less, really. I mean, I think if you ask a lot of the sports people in the country in this business, you know, they'll say, well, you know, it's free speech, and he's not a news journalist, so, you know, what's the big deal, really? But, you know, the politicians don't like it. And there are plenty of people as well at home who you know, are probably watching this now saying, you know, stick to football, Gary. That's the argument, isn't it? And, you know, maybe there's a bit of jealousy involved. There's a massive amount of money he earns, probably too much. You're right, £1.75 million, which makes him accountable. So, you know, whether the incoming BBC chairman will go further and try to change the guidelines, I don't know. I'm not sure it'll happen. I think Gary thinks he's pretty safe at the moment, and whereas, you know, the public opinion is split. I think he's not going anywhere.
Chris, I'm in complete awe. This is one of the greatest sports broadcasters ever. Chris Skudder, welcome to Talk Today. Thank you for being on. You use so many... bless you. Listen, you use so many words. Emboldened's absolutely right, because let's be perfectly honest, they bowed down. If you've got guidelines as a company, stick by them. But last time, Shearer, my mate, Wrighty, they all walked out. He was emboldened. He's fine. Davey backs down. And you're right. He feels emboldened to be able to. This is the BBC's problem. Have rules and stick by them, or let somebody run amok. You make the point about being accountable. There is a weight of opinion that if you're paid 1 point whatever, and the relevance of that is we're all paying his wages in terms of a licence fee. We're also paying MPs' wages. I'm a bit like you. Either tell him he can or tell him he can't. He's one of those people. I mean, I've said my bit. He's a hypocrite because he took the money from Qatar, but that's my opinion, right? But just move the hell on. Tell him he can or tell him he can't. But that guy yesterday, Samir Shah, who's coming in, that's really relevant because he's the next chairman. Is he going to stand by what he said yesterday? No idea.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm having conversations with Tim Davey. You know, it's... there's so many grey areas here, you know. For me, all the guidelines are just not black and white. What happens when you mix black and white? You get grey, and that's, you know, that's what Gary's feeding off, really. Listen, they are free, the BBC, to say, well, we don't want you anymore. But you saw what happened last time, and they bent over backwards to keep him. You know, there's no two ways about it. I mean, you remember that week after the comment about the government's Rwanda policy and Nazi Germany, sure, which, you know, did offend a lot of people. He was taken off air, right? He was taken off air, and people thought, "Wow, this is the real deal. He's not going to be back." But I thought at the time he definitely would be. And what happened was nobody would do match of the day that weekend. Do you remember? I mean, it was incredible. And so we had a sort of 10-minute program. All the football people walked out in support of Gary. He's a popular guy, you know, Wrighty, Shearer, the whole lot of them. And there was nobody. So he won that battle without a question. He won that battle. And, you know, the guidelines have come out and they've told him, they've been bold. You know, you can comment. It's just so grey. I mean, what?
Yeah.
You're right. You know, what can he say? What he can't? I don't get it. I really
Chris, you know, like you say, there seems to be a grey area in the social media guidelines here, but it always kicks up such a fuss when it's specifically Gary Lineker. Lots of people work for the BBC, lots of people make comments. But do you think that the reason why people get so up in arms about Gary Lineker is because politicians see him as a threat? Because he reaches out to people that the Tory party could only...
I think it's what he earns.
Because Gary Lineker reaches out and speaks to people who the Tory party could only dream of getting engaged in politics.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, you know, Lineker can punch from a distance, can't he? He can always sort of say, "Oh, I'm not a news journalist." So, you know, it's not a fair fight in many respects. But you know, you saw yesterday classic stuff, you know, with having a Twitter spat with you know, Lee Anderson, Jonathan Gullis, and Grant Shapps. It's quite amusing for the punters.
It's not hard to do, Chris.
Can I point out something as well which made me laugh because I read this? Shearer will beat me up. Match of the day, when they all went out in support, was a half-an-hour programme of just highlights with a voiceover which got 500,000 more viewers. So I'm sat here thinking maybe Talk Today should have absolutely no presenters. We'll just do this for the next 2 hours.
Right.
We'll all be redundant. But no, listen, you know, some people liked it. Some people like that, you know, and it was, but listen, I think you're right. I mean, it's, you know, he earns a lot of money. Listen, the BBC are within their rights to say we're gonna. I mean, Lineker's got all the power at the moment.
Yeah.
He's been emboldened. He can do what he wants, and he's pushing it to the limits a little bit. I mean, technically, I think he is criticising the characters of some of these people. And that's the guidelines say you can't do that. So, you know, let's see what happens. But
Chris, I'm going to listen, but no disrespect. We're going to have to leave it there. I love you. Microwave, and most of all, I love having you on. Thank you so much indeed.